Alright, hello there. Hope you all are doing good and staying hydrated. I've scanned through Reddit and found these really creepy real life stories that I'm going to share with you in a second, so grab your snack and get comfortable. Before we continue though, please make sure to follow me on Instagram, subscribe and hit the bell if you haven't already, and make sure to check out the mystery link that I will leave down in the description. I was about 4 or 5 years old and my parents had just separated. My mom was living in a 2-bedroom apartment and I had my own room, but I preferred to sleep in her bed whenever I was staying with her. Our 2 bedrooms were at the end of a hallway, directly across from each other. Our apartment was on the first floor, and I remember that it was in the middle of the summer and my mom had a window open, which was directly behind the bed, above the headboard. Anyway, I woke up in the middle of the night and remember sitting up and seeing that our cat was sitting in the doorframe of my mom's room. Her door was open and you could partially see into my bedroom. This was quite strange because our cat was typically always in bed with us. As I was watching him, he walked into my bedroom and meowed. I turned to face my mom and wake her up. In the 3-4 seconds it took her to wake up and ask me what was wrong, we both looked back up in the doorframe, and there was a man standing by my open door, making his way out of my bedroom. I still don't know how she managed to do this so quickly, but my mother proceeded to pick me up and literally throw me out of the screen window. Again, we were on the first floor and it was maybe a 3-foot drop to the ground. She quickly followed and we were able to start screaming for help and someone called 911. The police came but didn't see any signs of forced entry, only that our front door was unlocked, which led them to believe that man must have exited that way. The strange thing was that my mom swore up and down that she had locked the door that night with the deadbolt and chain lock. About a week later, she was cleaning the kitchen and opened up our water heater closet and found a notebook with names and drawings, as well as a pair of gloves and some gum wrappers. The police were called again, but all they could do was to speculate that the man had been in our house and hid until we were asleep. A few years ago, I was home alone at nighttime. I was watching TV in the living room when I heard the doorbell ring. Whenever I hear the doorbell ring, especially when I'm home alone, I am cautious to answer it. I walk up to the peephole without turning on the porch light so they don't know if anyone is actually home or not, and look through. It's really dark, but I can see a small figure, more like black blob. I couldn't make out its definite shape, but it had to be around 3-4 feet. It was doing like a dancing motion, dipping down and oscillating its arms outward. Think of a person moving their arms like wings, gracefully. It was really dark outside, but this figure was more opaque, so I could see what was going on. After a few seconds, I stopped looking through the peephole because it was too freaky to look at. I regained some courage and looked back through, and whatever it was gone. To this day, I still don't know what that was, and I get freaked out thinking about it. This was somewhere in the late 80s or early 90s. I was around 6 to 7 years old. I am at home with my sister, who is 14 to 15 at the time. We grew up in a small Texas town. Everyone knows everybody. We are home alone this particular night, and my parents let my sister babysit me frequently. We always got along due to our age gap. Anyway, it is about 8 p.m. in the winter. Deserts get pretty damn cold, so it is dark and we are in the common room since that is where the TV was. Watching 60 Minutes or 48 Hours or a hard copy of some crap, those 1-hour news pieces on CBS that chronicle large crimes in depth. Trafficking, murders, kidnapping, and stuff like that. Basically a gritty Lifetime special. This one was a typical story. Guy next door that was quiet went on a rampage in his next door neighbor's house, mutilating them and kidnapping their young daughter. Well, the thing about our house common room is the door leading to the backyard was a large glass door on a wall of floor-to-ceiling windows. Nothing but blackness beyond it unless you have the black light on, which we did not. The front door is on the other side of the room with a small entryway. This is a solid door, so you cannot see what is beyond it, with a glass storm door on the outside of it. About 45 minutes into the show, they are talking about the ongoing manhunt for this crazy guy, and the front door bangs like crazy. We jump the hell up and scream like banshees. Dead silence now. The only lights on in the house are the kitchen down the hall from the common room we were in, and the light from the TV. We started thinking that something on the porch, we had some planters and a rocking chair out there, had simply blown against the door. This was West Texas, crazy strong winds out that way. Just when we are about to declare everything is safe, we hear the storm door on the outside of our front door close. Someone had to have opened that door to be able to bang on the front door like that. We were both frozen in the middle of the room on the floor where we had been watching TV. My sister crawls over to the TV and turns it off. It was an old TV, so you had to turn that metal dial to switch it off, which it does with a mildly loud thunk. Now it is just us in a room dimly lit by the kitchen light down the hall. I do not remember how much time passed with me being frozen and my sister still crouched by the now off TV, but we kept making eye contact then looking at the front door. I remember this part vividly. I am on my knees, sitting on my feet, and I turn around to look at the back wall of windows and glass door. We hear and I see the back door knob turn. It was locked on the knob but not deadbolted. It rattles slightly as if someone is gently trying to handle. Neither of us make a sound, just held breath. Then, loud as hell, someone is trying to force the door open, just jerking it back and forth. The whole wall of windows is vibrating violently, and I can see with each jerk of the door how my slight reflection gets fuzzy, then clear, then fuzzy. My sister flips her shit and screams bloody murder. I am still frozen on the floor. She gets up and basically drags me into her bedroom, slams the door, throws her mattress and anything she can in front of the door. Thankfully, she had remembered the phone. One of those ungodly heavy beige plastic long metal antenna portable phones. We still had to direct dial the sheriff there, and in her panic she didn't remember the number. She just hit redial on the phone. It was one of her friends, and she tells them in broken gasps that someone is trying to get into our house and needs to get there right there and now. The profanity sticks out here more than anything else. Who knows? Young brain. I am curled up on the floor and cannot stop shaking. We don't hear anything else until we see the headlights of my sister's friend and her parents driving up to the house. We never did find out who was at the door or why. There were no signs of anything happening but a couple of scuff marks on the bottom of the back door that we could not remember if they were there beforehand or not. Nothing like that has happened to me or her since, but for damn sure we never forget to lock a door after that. About 5 years ago, my mom started dating a guy she met on a dating site. That part is fine. I had recently started dating the woman who would later become my wife, and we had met online. I'll just refer to her as my wife for this story. Anyway, my wife and I never really liked this guy. We didn't think he was mean or anything like that, just a little creepy. He was quiet, he kept his eyes closed a lot, and occasionally said odd things like offering my wife a chocolate and then popping one in his mouth, closing his eyes, and moaning as he let it melt in his mouth. One time, my wife and I were visiting my mom, but she got called into work, so we waited at her house. Her boyfriend was over, but he spent the entire several hours just hanging out in her bedroom with the door closed. Just before Christmas, my mom and this guy started having some difficulties. My wife and I were visiting her for the holidays, and she dropped all of her problems on us and listened carefully and told her our opinions and suggested that she would be better off without him. She already had her mind made up though and decided to break up with him on Christmas Eve. We spent the night at my mom's and got up early on Christmas morning to visit my dad at his house. We didn't plan to spend the night at my dad's, but we got snowed in, which was actually a nice Christmas surprise. The next day we left as soon as we could get through the snow, and my wife suggested that we stop by my mom's house on the way so that we could see if she's doing okay. My wife just had a really bad feeling about my mom's now ex-boyfriend. My mom's car was in the driveway, but that doesn't mean much because she lives close enough to work that she often walks, and it hadn't snowed in her town. She also never locks her door, which drives me crazy, so we let ourselves in. That's when we see blood oozing out of the refrigerator's water dispenser. It had filled up the spill container and was leaking into the floor and had made a puddle. My wife screamed and I freaked out. I fully expected to see my mom's head in the freezer or something. I nervously opened the freezer to find a bag of dozen cherries that had been opened, crammed into the freezer so that it fell onto the ice dispenser and melted. One day while doing my laundry, one of the lights blew out in my basement. My basement is set up so that the laundry room is split from the other side of the basement with a wall and a door. In order to get upstairs, you have to exit the laundry room and go through the other part of the basement. So the light blew in the other part, not the laundry room. As it was the only light on that side, it was pretty damn dark. I finished the laundry I had to do while dreading the walk through the dark basement. I exit the laundry room, get halfway through the basement, and I hear a loud cackle. Imagine a sound people make when they imitate a witch. Take that and imagine that the witch had been smoking for 50 years, making her voice deeper and hoarser. That is what I heard, clear as a day, right behind me. I did not hesitate to look and bolted for the stairs. I waited until my father got home to change the bulb. I haven't heard that cackle ever since, and I have not told a single person in the house about it. It didn't actually happen to me, but it happened to my mom when she was a teenager. My mom now is in her mid-60s. She's not an overly religious woman. She doesn't read the Bible, rarely goes to church, but she prays every night because that is what gives her comfort. I'll have to side note that I watched normal horror movies with her every so often. Nothing too crazy or gory, but spooky stuff, if you will. Well, I asked her if she wanted to watch The Exorcist, and she flat out 100% refused. She said there's absolutely no way she will ever watch anything related to possession or exorcisms. So the movie Constantine comes out and I show her the trailer asking her if she wants to watch it. She sees the girl near the beginning climbing the ceiling and just refuses again. I should also note, my mother will refuse and kick you out of the house if you even think about bringing in a Ouija board into the house. She'll yell, scream, and cuss until you drop the subject, and that's that. This is important. Alright, so that the backstory is out of the way, I ended up asking her why exactly she refuses to watch those sort of movies. Well, she tells me when she was a teenager, at a sleepover at a friend's house, they were up playing games, and the parents watching TV. Her friends and herself are on the floor playing a board game, a game my mom has never played before. Well, come to find out, it's a Ouija board and she doesn't know what it does, so they start playing. They were asking a bunch of questions. They ended up finding out that there was a spirit in the house, so they ask it to show itself. Nothing happens. They demand it to show itself. This was her first indication something wasn't right, because the lights all around the house, every single room, went out immediately, including the TV, and then snapped right back on. Spooky, huh? Nah, that's just a fluke. They asked the next question. Who are you? The piece moves around the board in the big circles with their hands on it and stops at the letter D, moves to the letter E, then to the letter V-I-L. Wow, someone must be messing with it. This can't be real. So they ask, if you are the devil, then show yourself. Nothing happens for a while, and then suddenly, the TV goes out. Well, in the reflection in the TV, sitting in the living room next to them, my mom and her friends, even the parents could make out the shape of something. Something terrifying just sitting there, next to them. The house got extremely cold. Suddenly, loud noises could be heard in the kitchen. Stuff flying off of the top of the refrigerator and cupboards opening and closing. They immediately stop the game, close it up, and throw it in the trash, never to play one again. Later that night, my mom is sound asleep and is awoken by something loud and clanging on the roof. She listens intently and she can hear what sounds like chains and dogs up in the roof. Well, that's not possible. It must be outside somewhere. She wakes up in the morning and goes and talks to her friend's parents, asks them if any of their neighbors have any dogs. They tell her no, and they tell her they also heard the dogs and chains up in the roof last night. So that is the story of why my mom refuses to watch anything that involves exorcism. She truly believes that the devil was there with them that night, sitting next to them. And the messed up thing is, every time she tells me that story, I get this cold shiver down my spine that there is no way she would be making this up. Back when I was attending a university, I used to work on a campus at one of the dining halls during the dinner night shift. I lived in the next town over since it was cheaper to live in a crappy little apartment out of town than to live on campus in the dorms. But I didn't own a car, so I had to take the bus. One night, I had just gotten off a shift at work. My feet were killing me and I was completely exhausted as I slowly made my way to the bus stop. I noticed a man much older than me sitting on one of the two benches at the otherwise empty bus stop. But I didn't pay too much attention to him. I simply sat down on the second bench and listened to some music while waiting for the bus to arrive. The first sign that things were starting to get weird was when I kept noticing out of the corner of my eye that he was staring at me. I thought I might be imagining it, so I looked over and caught him quickly turning his head to look away. Okay, so he was staring at me, This wasn't completely out of the ordinary since being a young college girl seemed to gain me a bit of attention from older men. So like usual, I just ignored him. This was a mistake. Again, out of the corner of my eye, I saw him look at me. But instead of just staring this time, he got up and walked over to sit next to me instead. I continued listening to my music, hoping that he'd see the earbuds and take the hint that I wasn't interested in having a conversation. Instead, this man literally took the earbud out of my ear. "Hey there, sweetheart," he said as my head snapped to look at him in shock. I should have told him off for touching my things and demanded he leave me alone, but I was sort of frozen and didn't want to make him mad. Hi," I replied quietly. He started introducing himself as Mike and telling me that he lived in the area and it was always nice to see pretty girls like me at the university bus stop. He explained that he was a real man, unlike the boys I went to school with, and that I would go home with him that night. I was a shy, scared virgin who had never had a man be as bold as this to my face. I didn't know how to respond, so I didn't. But that didn't stop Mike from continuing to explain to me all of the fun things he wanted to do with me at his place that night. He got into graphic detail. The things he described started out with basic things you'd expect, and escalated to him asking if I liked being choked until I turned purple and passed out in bed. I wish there was anyone else in that bus stop, but it was just the two of us, in the dark, alone, as I counted the seconds until the bus would arrive. Then Mike took things to a different level of shocking by telling me, "Listen, the demons want me to ask you for your phone number, and they say you should give it to me or you won't like what happens." He actually had the audacity to start stroking my hair. His hand was gentle, but I didn't want him touching me at all. This was shocking for a number of reasons. The demons? I wouldn't like what would happen? Why was he touching me? What the hell was this guy talking about? As though he could read my mind, Mike went to explain. "My therapist knows the demons are real. I told her about them, and she says I'm not crazy and the demons are real." He laughed, then abruptly stopped. "Now give me a phone number like they said," he demanded, and as his hand stroked my hair for the last time, he stopped and gripped the back of my neck, still gentle, but even more terrifying. I was scared and obviously didn't want him to have my phone number. But he was taking out his phone, and I knew he was going to call the number I gave him to make sure I wasn't lying to him. And he still had his hand on the back of my neck, so I reluctantly gave him my real phone number. Stupid, I know, but I was right, and he immediately called to check. All I could think about was just not making this guy angry long enough to get away from him, and I'd block his number. Thankfully, the bus came moments later. I sat down as close to the front of the bus near the bus driver as I possibly could, since the bus was basically empty. Mike decided to sit directly across from me. At this point, I had tried listening to music again, hoping that being on the bus and him having my phone number would signal to him the end of our conversation. However, he decided to reach over and unzip my sweatshirt, revealing my work shirt and the name tag, which I had unfortunately forgotten to remove in my haste to leave work that night. I hadn't told him my name yet. Abigale, what a beautiful name. Our daughter will be named Celeste. I shouldn't have been shocked at this point, but I was. I had stopped listening to music again and zipped my sweatshirt back up, which made him laugh. "You won't need that soon anyway," he said, and winked at me, implying how he'd planned to undress me even further that night. At one stop, Mike tried to convince me to get off the bus with him. I told him no, that I was tired and just wanted to go home. So he said okay, and stayed on the bus. I knew that had been his stop, so the fact that he was staying on the bus worried me. I was sure this meant that he was planning on coming home with me instead. "Baby," Mike whispered to me. I tried to ignore him, but he repeated himself louder. "Baby." He had the most unsettling smile on his face as I asked, "What?" He laughed and told me, "The demons say you smell nice." I was terrified and felt like I was going to throw up by the time my bus stop arrived. I lived in an apartment alone and didn't want him to know where I lived. Despite my body being exhausted and sore from work, adrenaline kicked in and I bolted off the bus and ran straight home. I made it inside and locked the door. I looked through the peephole and didn't see him, so I went to carefully peek out of my window and saw him standing near the bus stop, looking around. He took out his phone, and sure enough, I started getting a call from an unknown number since I hadn't saved his. I ignored it. When he hung up, I started getting several texts asking where I'd gone, how he didn't like hide and seek, and how the demons just wanted to have fun, but I was being a little bitch about it. I was so scared because he knew which apartment building I lived in, where I worked, and where I went to school, my phone number, and my name. The only good thing which made me feel slightly relieved was that he didn't know which specific number apartment I lived in. That's when he started yelling outside. There was no specific words said, just wordless yells of what I can only assume were frustrations and anger. I blocked his number and kept all of the lights in my apartment off as I cried with my back to the front door. Maybe I should have called the police, but my brain was so frazzled that I didn't even think of that until the next day. And by then, all I knew about him was that he was a mentally unstable man, probably named Mike, who hadn't actually done any physical harm to me, so I didn't think it was worth it. In hindsight, I know that I made a lot of stupid mistakes during this experience. I ended up moving away entirely at the end of that term of school for unrelated reasons. But until then, I switched to day shifts at work and was paranoid every night. Thankfully though, I never saw that man again. Me and my mother were driving through a small town in Southwest Virginia. My mother and father are divorced, and he lived in Tennessee. They had very different viewpoints on helping out hitchhikers, as my dad was very much into hiking, camping, and etc. But there was a woman walking down on the road. Mind you, it's very hot outside, it's the summertime, and I noticed she was carrying a child swaddled up in a blanket, which struck me as a poor choice considering it was the middle of a summer. Just seemed too warm for a swaddle. So I said to my mom, "We really need to pick that woman up. Surely she isn't far from where she needs to go. And she has a baby." And to my surprise, my mom pulls into the gas station parking lot, tells me to go in and get a large bottle of water, and we will ask her if she would like a ride. So we pull out of the gas station and approach the thin, almost sickly looking woman, and she very quietly just grabbed the door handle and got inside, not saying anything at all, not even a thank you, which really didn't sit right with me, because this is the South. Everyone is friendly and approachable, for the most part. So we ask where she's needing to go, and me being in the passenger seat, I turn to look at her, and she's looking down at her baby and cooing it. She replies without ever looking up. About 2 miles past the Dollar General on the Jet Stewart. We were very close to that area. I decided to turn and speak to the woman and maybe get the conversation going, but as I get a better look at her baby, it actually was a drywall hammer wrapped up in a blanket, inside another blanket. I froze. It was like I walked into a deep freezer. I told my mom we needed to stop at the upcoming Dollar General. As we pull in, I told my mom to get out the car, that I needed her help locating the noise, and we met each other at the hood of the car, where I told her, "Mom, that is not a baby. She has a hammer in the blanket." To which my mother advised me that we should walk inside to see if they had anything to help close that up, and told the woman we would be right back. We walked inside and told them to call the police so that they could help this woman, that we could no longer have her in our vehicle, and explained why. My mom gave her some vague reason as to why we couldn't take her further, and she got out of the vehicle very angrily but almost confused, and we left her in the parking lot. She very well could have just been a really confused woman, maybe with some mental issues. I don't know what was going on with her, but I do know that I don't think she had good intentions for us. This happened to me 2 weeks ago. I started university in September and therefore lived in a students-only apartment complex. There are 4 other apartments in my hallway, and sometimes we just spend time in each other's apartments. I had the absolute chance, that's ironic, to lose my keys the first week of university. It wasn't a big deal. I simply paid for another key. After a week in my apartment, I started to notice that some of my stuff wasn't in the same place as I thought I put it. It didn't bother me because I know I'm a distracted person. On the day of the incident, I was coming home earlier than the usual with another student, Thomas, the boy that lives in the apartment next to mine. We got in, and when I unlocked my door, I saw a woman inside my apartment. Of course, it scared me, but as I was about to ask her what the hell she was doing here, she told me, "Oh, sorry, I didn't know you'd be home this early. I'm the janitor. I clean rooms weekly." She then smiled at me and went out. I didn't know we had a janitor, but this kind of explained why my stuff was moving. Thomas then noticed she had left the keys on my desk and said I should give them back to her. When I took a closer look, I just realized those were my lost keys. The night passed, and I decided to talk to the man in charge of the complex about this. I told him about the janitor and that I had lost my keys. He just looked at me in total incomprehension and told me, "But we don't even have a janitor." I just froze. Then who the heck went in my apartment for the past few weeks? Why was she there? We didn't call the police because nothing had been stolen, but I still searched for cameras in my apartment. You never know with these psychopaths these days. I haven't seen her since that, and I'm glad to know that she can't enter the complex anymore without the badge and the keys. Morals of the story: try not to lose your keys, guys. A few years ago, while on winter break from my university, I was staying in my hometown with my family. I had an extended break from school, longer than any other of my friends in college, and I wanted to get out of my house. I had been speaking to a guy a few years older than me, and he invited me over to his place. I met him through a combination of mutual friends and social media. I figured since he knew some of my friends, he wouldn't do anything crazy. I showed up to his apartment, and one of the first things I notice is a baseball bat, haphazardly studded with nails. He jokingly opened the door with it in his hands. I start to get nervous. All ends fine though. We watch TV, chat, play with his dog, and everything else seems normal, although very boring. We do the do and I leave in one piece. He ghosts me for about 3 weeks after that, while claiming he's sick. He ditches plans we have and I move on. The night before I leave for university, he told me he found something of mine. Very, very important thing I had left there on accident. I quickly drive over late at night in hopes to just grab it and go. I do manage to get it, but not before he breaks down crying about how much he missed me. He's clearly upset I'm leaving, even though he had decidedly ignored me for about 3 weeks. He said he made a huge mistake by not seeing me sooner and by flaking on our plans. Very weird, and I'm incredibly uncomfortable. He goes on to speak about his ex-girlfriend and how terrible she was, how I'm not like her and he needs me in his life. I did my best to politely shut him up before skirting my ass out of there. I remember laughing so hard the entire drive home because if I didn't, I would have panicked out of fear. The next day, I flew back to college many states away. A few weeks later, he starts messaging me again. Normal things at first. How are you? How's the semester? I answer maybe 2 out of 20 texts. 2 p.m., messages turn into 3 a.m. messages. Those messages then turn into frequent phone calls. Now at this point, I hadn't been answering for months. Every time I think he's done and he hasn't contacted me in a while, it happens again. I blocked him over and over and over. Each time he found a new way to call or text or DM or whatever. He said things like, he loves me, he misses me, he's going to come and visit me, he's depressed and really needs someone to talk to, he's crying or he's drunk or he's somewhere in between, he's sober and calling me a cunt or worse. It was all over the place. I felt safe enough since I was so far away, 1,500 plus miles. I didn't think anything would come out of it. It was always just a funny story to tell to my friends. One day I was in the bus browsing Tinder and guess who popped up? Super liked me, 1 mile away from my campus. Holy crap. I started panicking. There's no way he's here. Mind you, this person knew no one in the entire state except for me. He worked in a restaurant and would not have traveled there for work. There's no reason for him to be 600 miles away from me. Absolutely none. Yet there he was. I frantically check all of my social media DMs and see a message from him on Twitter, even though he's blocked. He must have been saving his account to contact me on a rainy day, and it really got to me. The DM read, "Hey, for some reasons, why you hate me? I'm in your city right now. I was hoping you can show me around. I miss you. Unblock me." I text my close friends to add him on Snapchat in hopes they can monitor his location. He ends up passing my residence building, but thankfully not finding me. He is by himself the entire time. He went to some popular spots in the city, but didn't post much at all. For a week, I stayed locked in my room, absolutely terrified he tried to bypass the dorm security and knock on my door. He didn't find me, but I bet he tried. I still wonder why he was in my city that week. Was he trying to hunt me down? Was he trying to vacation? Mind you, this city is not a place for tourists, and is definitely not like Los Angeles or New York, where people are coming and going all the time. People have work, school, or family reasons when coming to this city. So, to this guy who barely knew me for 3 weeks, but still thinks he loves me to this day, nearly 4 years later, let's not meet again. This is it. I hope you enjoyed these stories. If you did, please leave a like, comment something down below, subscribe, hit the bell, and check out that mystery link in the description.